Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and jump right into this. All right. The first thing I'd like you to do is just imagine for a moment that you are evicted from the home you own, the home you actually own. You're evicted from it. Can you imagine how that might happen? Well, earlier this year in February, I received a call from a person to whom this actually did happen. This person had owned their home for 25 years. And one day they received notification that they were being evicted. Now, how could this person be evicted from the home they own? They weren't renting it, they owned it. What they came to find out was that a person had forged foreclosure documents, so made it look like this house had been sold at a foreclosure auction, forged those documents and filed them with the county. It's all fraud. But to the outside world, it looked like at that point, the house had been foreclosed on. The victim homeowner had no idea this was going on at the time. There was no actual foreclosure sale that was just made up. And she didn't know anything that was happening until she was served with notice of an eviction lawsuit. So after she sort of got her bearings and kind of figured out what was going on, she tried to hire a lawyer. Now, lawyers are expensive. And she didn't have a lot of extra cash. So she hired a young lawyer who wasn't very experienced in litigation or any kind of lawsuits of any kind. And honestly, the lawyer messed up in that eviction lawsuit. And there was a judgment issued against her based on those fraudulent foreclosure documents. They were fraudulent, but the lawyer didn't do a good job of proving to the court that they were fraudulent. There was no foreclosure that happened. And so the next thing that happened was she was evicted from her very own home. Now, if you want to know the underlying legal aspect of this, is sure, those foreclosure documents are fraudulent and void, but she's still in the position of having to prove to the court that she is the true owner, and she couldn't afford the right lawyer to get this done. This was a very real situation, a very real case that happened here in Southern California earlier this year. So I want to talk to you today about senior citizen homeowners, and why they tend to be targeted by criminals, con artists, fraudsters. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I have been fighting these kinds of real estate cases since 2003. I've been a lawyer since 1997, but in 2003, that's when the first real estate fraud case came to my desk when I was still a deputy district attorney in Los Angeles County. And then I started handling more and more of these cases over the years until it really became my specialty, real estate fraud cases. And what you see on the screen now is a picture of me about 15 years ago when my hair still had some color. I was still a deputy district attorney. And one of my cases against a local fraudster in Southern California was on the news. And so I appeared on several news programs about this case. Ended up putting that fraudster away for 7 years. Once he got out, he did it again. And some other district attorneys in another nearby county have put him in prison for 14 years now. I've heard rumors that he's still committing these crimes from inside the jail. So that's a little bit about me. I have probably represented more victims of home title theft than any other attorney in the country. I can't verify that. There's no way to verify that, but I know everybody who's in this space pretty much. And I don't think anybody comes anywhere close to the number of cases that I've handled on that subject. As I mentioned, I'm a former real estate fraud prosecutor. I even wrote some legislation affecting real estate fraud back in 2008. And I'm part of the faculty that teaches California detectives how to investigate real estate fraud cases. Now, I don't only handle real estate fraud. Throughout the years, I've handled all sorts of cases, investment fraud, embezzlement, insurance fraud, identity theft, and so on. But really sort of the biggest bulk of the cases have been real estate fraud related. And I think that's because that's where so much fraud happens, because there's a lot of money in real estate. And so fraudsters look for ways to steal money in the real estate world. Okay, so why, just the big general question, why do fraudsters, that's my term, other people say con artists, other people say scammers, why do fraudsters target senior citizens generally in all the different types of scams? Well, there are a number of reasons. I think the first one we should talk about is that's where the money is. Generally, not all senior citizens, but a lot of senior citizens have saved up their nest egg. They might have pensions, they might have a savings account, IRAs, 401ks. They probably have some real estate with a lot of equity in it that they intend to use during their retirement. And so because that's where there is potentially so much money, that's where the fraudsters go, because they want to take that money. Now, younger people, of course, might have the money, but a greater percentage of the older folks have saved up money for that period of their life. And so that's why the fraudsters want to victimize people who have retired. There's several other reasons, though. A lot of older folks find themselves isolated and lonely as they get older, and those two characteristics make it easier for con artists to sort of persuade them and take advantage of them. Con artists are looking for different ways to persuade people to trust them, which the fact that they're isolated and lonely enables the con artists to sort of control their world better, control the world of these older folks better, and manipulate them. Again, that's not all senior citizens, but we all know some who find themselves in that situation where they're alone and don't have a support network around them on a daily basis. And I have a real concern that there is going to be a leaf blower outside my office window any minute. They seem to be getting closer and closer. So we'll deal with that as it comes. All right, caregivers. Caregivers are often in a position of power over these older folks, and which gives them an opportunity to influence them, often in nefarious ways. It gives them a way to control the elder's world, control their mail, control their access to friends and family who might take a closer look at what the caregiver is giving. Now, look, I'm not saying most or even many caregivers are unscrupulous like this, but in any group of people anywhere, there's always going to be some people who are unethical or unscrupulous or criminal. And so, of course, you're going to find some of those among caregivers for senior citizens as well. Right. And it's not necessarily just privately employed caregivers. It could be family members. In my experience as a prosecutor, often the suspects and the defendants were children or siblings of the elder who do the lion's share of the work to caring for this elder, and they feel entitled. That they're putting on all the work. They deserve this person's house or their money, or to have a little bit of pleasure, to go out and buy, nice luxury items and whatnot. And so they talk themselves into it and rationalize it. And some are just criminals as well. Some of them are just, they have no empathy. They don't feel empathy, and they just target the elder. But there are all sorts of reasons why a caregiver might commit this type of a crime against a senior citizen. And because the senior citizen requires the care of this person, they find themselves vulnerable to this type of crime. And then the last one is trust. When you talk to detectives and prosecutors who handle a lot of these cases. They say the problem is these elders trust people. And so I've really spent a lot of time thinking about that, analyzing it, researching online, trying to understand what that means. And to some extent, it's true about some older folks that they come from a trusting generation, a generation of people who just they trust each other and they trust the people around them, and that alone leaves them vulnerable. But I think it's more than that. You might find some older folks who didn't save enough. They don't have a big enough nest egg, at least for their own liking, or they don't have the money that they want to leave to the next generation. And so they can get suckered in by people who are offering to them that big win, that last big win that's going to put them over the top and give them that cushion they need, or give them the money that they can leave to their children. But you also have other things like affinity fraud, which applies to people of all ages. I mean, affinity fraud means a connection. So it might be somebody from the same group, somebody that goes to the same church, somebody who speaks the same language, comes from the same background, same cultural background. There are all sorts of affinities and connections that con artists can exploit. And so that applies to people of all ages. And lastly, I think con artists, they need to build a rapport with their victim. They need the victim to trust them and to have confidence in them, and to have confidence in their con game, their confidence game. And some seniors have multiple avenues of attack. It could be the affinity fraud. It could be that they are lonely and just want to talk to somebody. They feel isolated, and the con artist can come in that way. There are different ways that senior citizens make open doors for these con artists, and perhaps there are more doors open with seniors than with other age groups. So when I hear the word trust, I think it's a much more complex situation than simply they are a trusting generation, because that can't be true of every generation, whereas every generation is a victim of con artists. So as you can see, there are at least 4 reasons why older folks are victims of con artists like this. So
we do have a question in the chat.
it's perfect timing. This is when I wanted to jump in and ask for some questions. So
it's from Nevin.
So yeah, I'll go ahead. I have it here. I'll go ahead and read it. All right. It says, we understand from your reports that title insurance companies and cities are losing lots of money from fraud. Given this, and given that Veritable can prevent fraud, why hasn't a major title insurance company formed a contract with Veritable? Well, we're working on that. We're moving in that direction, because a lot of the people on this call may not be aware of it. I am a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. I specialize in this kind of fraud, but I also formed a company to develop technology to prevent fraud, and we have developed technology to prevent deed fraud from the get-go. Nobody else is offering a complete solution the way we do. So let's see. Okay, the question was just posted 2 times. So, but we are working in that direction, talking with title companies to prevent fraud and to save them a lot of money that they lose from this type of fraud. Thanks for the question, Nevin. Please keep them coming, everybody. So before we move on to the next question, I just want to give, to this question here on the screen, why are senior homeowners targeted with deed fraud? I just want to briefly explain what deed fraud is for the people on this call that may not know. If you want a detailed analysis of deed fraud, look at my other webinar, the previous webinar on that subject, the 10 things you need to know about deed fraud. But just briefly, deed fraud is committed when somebody forges a deed related to your house or a property that you own. So what they do is they forge a deed that makes it look like you sold them your house, or gave them your house, gifted them your house, or your house was sold at a foreclosure sale, like the example I gave you earlier in the day. That's what happens with deed fraud. Now, home title theft is the most damaging type of identity theft. We all know what identity theft is. home title theft or deed fraud is just another form of identity theft. But in my opinion, my humble opinion, it is the most destructive form of identity theft because it is so hard to unwind the damage and it's so expensive and time consuming to do so. Now, look, the vast majority of people will not be a victim of title theft. That's just, the numbers, but it's just so damaging to those people who are the victims. I like to think of us as being in a big school of fish. Only a handful of us will get eaten by a shark. But for those who get eaten, it's not a great situation, obviously. So unfortunately, the only way to unwind deed fraud is through a special kind of lawsuit called a quiet title action, which again, you can learn more about that in my previous webinar. So with that background, let me go ahead and start answering this question. Why are senior homeowners targeted with deed fraud? Well, I want you to imagine for a moment that you're a criminal. That's what we have to do when we're trying to defeat these people. We have to try to get inside their mind and figure out what they're thinking and figure out what they're going to do next. So you're a criminal and you want to steal a lot of money, right? You could rob a bank, right? Well, the average take from a bank robbery is $4,000. And guess what? They all get caught and they all go to prison for decades, especially if they brandished a gun during the process of the bank robbery. So there are some serious downsides to doing this and little upside because that money, $4,000, doesn't last very long and you're going to go to prison anyway. Okay, maybe you could commit some kind of credit card, but most of these criminals, they're not hackers. They don't know how to steal your credit card number and turn it into something that they can use. They don't know how to do these kinds of things. That's a very sophisticated process. So you're sitting there as a criminal trying to figure out how to do this and wondering if there is a better way. And you look over and you see your old grandmother or grandfather and you start thinking about the house they own. The thing about home title theft is that most of the perpetrators never get caught and never go to prison. And this isn't to denigrate law enforcement, but they're simply outnumbered. There will simply never be enough fraud investigators to investigate all fraud crimes. There can't be, because I had a detective once say to me that he could close about 20 residential burglary cases in the time it took to close just one fraud case. They're time consuming to investigate. They're labor intensive. And so because of that dynamic, we just can't and won't ever have enough detectives. So most of these title theft perpetrators, deed fraud perpetrators, will get away with it. And those who are unlucky enough to get caught, they're going to get a relatively mild sentence compared to other types of crimes. The sentences for these types of crimes are usually 4 to 6 years in prison. There are a few outliers that are higher than that, up in the teens and maybe a little higher, but those are really unusual. Let's see, we have a chat that came in. So the question is, property deeds are recorded at the county recorder's office. What liability, if any, does the county have if title fraud occurs? None. Their job is to keep accurate copies of official documents. They are a repository of official documents, and they are not set up or expected to by law or for any reason to be able to distinguish between fraudulent and non-fraudulent documents. In our society, that job of deciding who's lying, who's not, what's a forgery, what's authentic, that's related to left to the courts in most circumstances. So the county won't be on the hook for this. Now, it is their obligation, I think, as representing the homeowners, not representing the homeowners, but servicing the homeowners in the county to support services that could prevent this kind of crime, just as part of their job as public servants. But as far as a legal obligation goes, there isn't one. Thanks for the question. All right, so as I said, just briefly, this is an example of a forged deed of identity theft. In this case, this gentleman, Isaac Perkins, his identity was stolen to transfer ownership out of his name. And what's interesting about this particular deed, I always come back to this one. I've got dozens and dozens of examples, but this is my favorite because it shows so many things going wrong on here. We've got Isaac Perkins, who had no idea that this was happening. They misspelled his name. The attorney, in fact, down below, who supposedly signed his name, signed for Isaac, didn't exist, was a fake, made-up name. I recognize the handwriting here of a con artist who is now in prison for 20 years, but had been wreaking havoc in the LA area for 30 years. And my favorite thing, though, here is the stamp down at the bottom, D. Hall. This notary never existed. This is an entirely fake notary stamp. And unfortunately, that's all too easy to come by nowadays. I mean, even I was able to purchase a fake notary stamp online for $14. It was delivered to my home 3 days later. Now mine says Joe Q Fraudster. It says fake on it. The seal says it's from the great state of confusion, little things like that. So this could never be used in real life. I use it for educational purposes. But the bottom line is anybody actually could order a fake notary stamp. I mean, that's how easy it is to commit this kind of crime. Anybody could order a fake notary stamp and just bypass the notary entirely. So there are other forged documents come along with it, include the forged mortgage or a forged power of attorney, which can be also very destructive, and the fraudulent sale of the property. So you can see how unwinding this damage can be a challenge, an expensive challenge. You have to hire an attorney to get this done. All right, so let's. Any questions briefly about that? Any questions about what I've said so far? Again, just put them in the chat box, and they will pop up at the bottom of my screen, and I will answer them at the best moment. All right, so who is the most vulnerable victim? Let's look at a couple of pictures here. Say you're a crook driving through town, and you see these two houses. Which one do you think a crook might choose? Well, on the picture on the top left, you see is it's overgrown front yard. It looks ignored. The owner is not paying attention to what's going on at this property. Maybe there's a senior citizen in there who is kind of detached from what's going on in the outside world. Maybe the house is vacant, which can also be useful in these types of crimes. Versus the other one, where you have a well-maintained yard, you have an active homeowner who is out there taking care of the property, involved in the outside world, paying attention to what's going on the property. You got to think about it. These con artists, once they steal title, and they're going to do one of three things. They're going to either rent the property out if it's vacant and collect the rents. They're going to sell it quickly to an investor who pays cash or gets a hard money loan, or if they might get a mortgage themselves from a hard money lender to suck the equity out of the property. And then they want to get away with their money. They want to disappear and abscond with their money. So the less cared for a property is, the more likely it is to be a target. Let me just jump in. There are some questions here.
Yeah, 2 questions are there.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there any movement in the legislature, state or federal, to upgrade legal records to some less vulnerable form? There are some attempts. I mean, that is a very good question. There are some attempts. A congressman from the Midwest has recently introduced some legislation that will move us in the right direction as far as investigating these kinds of crimes and reporting on it. But the legislation itself doesn't yet make any big changes that would prevent this type of crime, prevent the vulnerable, as you said, the records in being some less vulnerable form. But I do think that kind of legislation may be coming in the near future. Then we have a question from Edward, how we can identify a forged signature or stamp. Well, it's not that easy by the naked eye, honestly. As a prosecutor, I honestly rarely relied on what's the word I'm looking for? Signature experts. What am I looking for? People who can analyze writing. I've been at a loss for words at the moment. But people who can analyze writing and decide if it's a real or a fake. because they can rarely give a definitive answer. As far as forged stamps, there's no easy way to do it, really. There's just no easy way to do it. And especially if they have a fake ID. And some fake IDs out there nowadays are very high quality. You can't detect that they're fake by the naked eye. Sure, there are fakes that are not high quality, but there are ones that are top notch that are being produced around the world and sold throughout this country. I mean, about once every 6 months, I read online that the U.S. Customs has seized 10 or 20,000 fake IDs coming in from overseas to be distributed around the country. So there are challenges there. There is some technology that can be used, and we've built this into our technology to scan an ID and know whether or not it's real or fake. And so we can talk more of that perhaps at the end of this. All right, moving on. Let's see. Similarly, you're looking at the house, but you can also look at who's living in the house. I mean, again, if you're the criminal, who are you going to target here? You know, an older, isolated person who you can hopefully, possibly more easily manipulate into believing you and trusting you, or, you know, a young, active, vibrant family who's got a lot of things going on, doesn't really have time to listen to you and to listen to your spiel, isn't going to be sucked in as easily, that type of thing. So these are the types of things that the crooks consider. What are the characteristics we're talking about here? You know, you have the young family, the active, connected to the world, aware of what's going on, involved, attentive, versus the senior who's living alone, who's sedentary, disconnected, cocooned, solitary, inward looking, etc. I mean, who would you choose if you were thinking like a criminal? You'd go after the vulnerable victim, right? I just want to compare something here briefly. These two groups here, you know, in committing deed fraud. So with the first step for doing this is to file a forged deed. Well, that's easy because it doesn't involve the victim at all. It simply involves making the fraudulent deed and recording it at your county with your county clerk or county recorder. But then you want to prevent the discovery by the true homeowner. Well, this is hard by these involved, active, outward-looking, families versus the elder who might be under the care of a caregiver. The caregiver might be the suspect, the defendant, the perpetrator. So it's much easier with the elder. Obtain a mortgage loan in the name from a hard money lender. Again, you need to sort of control the situation. When the hard money lender sends out an appraiser to see the situation, you know, this is harder to do with the younger involved family, but much easier with an elder. Prevent the discovery by the true homeowner. Again, you can just see the pattern here. It's much easier to target those older, isolated folks than it would be other people who are more active and involved. Text is too big to read on the screen. That's interesting. That may be the device. I don't know how to solve that problem. I apologize for that. If you're unable to see it, it fills the screen of the desktop here, like a PowerPoint presentation does. So there are many other scams that we can go into more deeply in future webinars. But for the same reason, the crooks will target target elders for the same reason. I mean, these are telemarketing scams where they call in with fake charities, soliciting money for fake charities, or romance scams, sucking, you know, this isolated person into a romance with somebody they believe that they'll meet eventually, and they send this person money and all those types of things. Reverse mortgages are a valuable tool. They're very valuable for people in the right situation, but anything involving real estate can be manipulated by con artists into a scam to steal money. Let's see, investment schemes, talking people into investing into real estate or other type of investments that don't really exist. These might start off on the phone or through affinity fraud that we've talked about as well. But the bottom line is the bad guys choose the easy prey. And many senior citizens are just that. Not all, again, not all, but many senior citizens are the easy prey. And so that's why they fall victim. But, you know, we want you to be fast and strong like the antelope who got away from the bad guy. So let's just talk. I have a few more screens here. Let's just talk about what you can do to protect yourself from these kinds of crimes. It's key to have people around you that you trust, right? Now, the flip side of that is we know that it's the people we trust who might be the con artists, right? So, you always want, as you get older, you want to make sure you have a few trusted people around you who are involved with you on a regular basis. These can be friends, they can be family members, they can be your children, they can be your lawyer, they can be your pastor, all sorts of people who are just keeping an eye on you. But also watch out for anything that's unsolicited, like telephone calls or emails. There are some amazingly sophisticated con artists out there on the phone, and they are incredibly believable. And they also create these emails that actually look like they came from your bank or from some other trusted institution. So if these are unsolicited, and you don't know who's sending them, you don't trust them. Don't trust warnings on that pop up on your computer. The sophisticated con artists can get in there and put up a warning screen on your computer that looks legitimate. It looks like it's from your computer. But what they've done is they've gotten into your computer and they want you now to connect with them, and they will con you out of your money. Don't sign anything without a second opinion from other people you trust. Don't sign anything of consequence without talking to other people you trust. And lastly, if you're unsure, trust your gut, trust your instinct, and ask these other people in your circle of trust for their opinions as well. Don't just respond quickly, because remember, con artists are essentially salespeople who've gone evil. They've gone over to the dark side, right? And so they're really trying to create that. They're using some of those tools that salespeople do, which is to create a sense of urgency. And so that's what they will do here. So slow down the conversation, and rely on your network of trust. But make sure you have a network of trust. Don't go into your older years alone. If you have elderly parents, or if you have elderly grandparents or another senior citizen in your life, keep an eye on them. It takes a community. It takes a community to care for our senior citizens. Keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on their caregiver. I hate to say it, even if their caregiver is your sibling, siblings. Again, I don't want to condemn all people out there. The vast majority of caregivers are wonderful people, but this is where the suspects come from the people you trust. So, and then specifically with regard to the title of the house, you can watch for changes in that elder's title. You can do it yourself. You can go down to the county and get these public records about the title of the elder's house, of the senior citizen's house. Some counties, I'd say a handful of counties around the country, enable you to do this online. Makes it easy. And some counties, about 10% of counties, offer title monitoring services to their residents that you can sign up for. And for the other counties where there is no option to do that, and you don't think you're going to be checking it regularly, you can sign up for a private title monitoring service like Title Shield to do that for you. So let's see.
We have a question.
I do see that. So I see a couple of ones. One's from Catherine saying that she can see it. And then you mentioned about affinity fraud. I'll just tell you briefly about affinity fraud, but affinity fraud could have its own presentation altogether. Con artists need people to trust them. Actually, let me just wind up the presentation and we'll go into the question and answer session. And that's where I'll talk about affinity fraud. So with that, I hope you learned something today. And hope some nuggets of wisdom that you can take with you and think about whether you're in the real estate industry, if you're a senior citizen yourself, some senior citizens. I hope this was helpful to you. So with that, we'll go into the question and answer session, and I'll start with the question about affinity fraud from Mark. So affinity fraud is basically taking advantage of something that you have in connection. So the con artist wants that person to trust them. And we tend to trust people who are like us, whether we go to church with them, whether we play softball with them in some softball league, or we come from the same background, we come from the same country, we speak the same language. There are all sorts of different ways we connect with people in groups. And in any group, there are people who are unscrupulous, who are unethical, and they will take advantage of that connection because people are already trusting each other because of that connection. And so that's what affinity fraud, and it plays itself out in real estate fraud, it plays itself out in mortgage fraud, investment fraud, in online scams. It's just the concept of the bad guys taking advantage of that affinity or pre-existing connection so that people trust them. David mentions never pay for anything with gift cards or other questionable electronic transfers. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not 100% sure I understand why never pay for anything with gift cards. Electronic transfers, though, this is actually a relatively new scam. This is true. So the real estate industry has taken steps to deal with this, but it's still slipping through in certain situations where basically sophisticated con artists will hack into the title company's email system, pay attention to the emails, the different real estate transactions that are being closed, and they'll see about when the buyer needs to wire transfer their money for the purchase. And the crook will send out a fraudulent email from within the system of the title company, makes it look legitimate and real, saying, wire the money here. Well, the money then isn't going to the title company's account, not the escrow account. It's going to the bad guy's account that they've set up at Wells Fargo or Bank of America or some other bank. And before anybody knows what happens, the money has been wired several other times and is out of the country. Oftentimes these criminals, actually most of the time these criminals are out of the country somewhere, and they're taking advantage of this situation. So that's called wire transfer fraud. And it's a real problem in the real estate industry, but they're really taking steps to deal with that, to prevent that. So anytime you get wiring instructions, call the person who emailed you those wiring instructions and confirm that they sent them, and they confirm the information on them. Never wire anything just based on information you received in an email. Okay, so that was a good comment. Now, regarding what kind of insurance exists against title fraud, that's a good question too. So most title insurance does not cover title fraud. Now, we're talking about two different things. Title insurance will cover fraud that occurred in title before you purchased the property. But when we're talking about deed fraud and home title theft, we're talking about something that happens after you purchase the property, sometimes many years after. The beginning of this presentation, I told you about the homeowner. It happened to her 25 years after she purchased the property. So most title insurance policies do not cover that. Now, there are some title insurance policies that actually do. So if you can dig up your title insurance policy, you want to look for the phrase that says it covers forgery and fraud after the policy date. If it says it covers fraud after the policy date, well, then you're covered for this type of incident. And if you're a victim of title theft, then you can make a claim to your title company, and they will take care of it for you. Most title policies don't have that language in it. So there's that. I do know that there are several companies out there that will offer deed fraud insurance. To my knowledge, they're basically providing what's similar to identity theft insurance. They might provide several $1,000s worth of coverage of real identity theft insurance. That's not enough. That's not going to be enough to unwind the damage from deed fraud. Maybe there are some other policies out there that I haven't seen yet, but I don't think so. It would just be too expensive to provide true, complete coverage for deed fraud, because these lawsuits cost at a minimum $5,000, but typically tens of thousands of dollars to unwind the damage. And that's why it's so destructive. That's why it's such a problem, because when you get hit with deed fraud, it is a nightmare to unwind it. All right, let's see. Okay, let's see. David responded, gift cards are for gifts. Con artists ask victims to buy a gift card. Yes, that's right. So con artists will often ask the victims to buy a gift card and then give them the codes off the card. So yes, con artists do use gift cards as part of their scam. That's absolutely true. I want to say something about victims of con games. They always feel stupid. They can't believe they fell for this. They feel like they should have known better. But I truly believe there's a con artist out there for everybody. It's not going to be the same person for me or for you, because we trust different groups of people. We have different affinity groups, right? But if somebody was a con artist in my affinity group, I could very well be a victim because I inherently trust this person, just like people in your affinity group. So when the victims I've represented over the years, I try to let them know, don't feel stupid, because they were able to zero in on you. Now they're going to zero in on the person that they know they can focus on. A con artist doesn't have the skill to target anybody. They have the skill to target the people in their group that they know how to convince. So, all right, let's see. Let's go on. Belinda. Oh, you're welcome, Belinda. Thank you for your kind words. She said, I want to keep my elders safe. Thank you for elaborating. That's good. Let's see, from Elizabeth. Is there any way of reporting it to the police if we feel something is suspicious via email or phone? Any particular departments to report such complaints? Absolutely. I mean, anytime there is a crime occurs, you should immediately report it to your local law enforcement agencies. There are online ways to report different types of fraud, whether it's with the FTC, the FBI, the various other federal agencies. Your state Department of Justice has some ways to report crimes. So yes, there are different ways to report the crimes, and you should just so they have a record of this type of thing. But again, as I said, and I don't want this to sound cynical, I just want it to be realistic. Most fraud crimes will not get prosecuted because we can't ever have enough detectives investigating these crimes because they're so labor intensive. So definitely report it so there's a record, so that if it's part of a pattern or a bigger scheme or organized crime group that's doing it, the law enforcement will have those records. But keep your hopes low. Just saying that. And if you're a victim too, keep your hopes low. If you are a victim of some kind of real estate fraud or think you might be, I'm happy to talk with you about it. I'm a California lawyer, so I can't practice law in other states, but we can analyze the facts together and talk about what maybe steps you might take, and perhaps help find a lawyer in your area if you're a victim of some kind of real estate fraud or investment scheme, that type of thing. Like there are some new messages down below. Let's see. From Nevin, if you own a property free and clear and have title in your own safe, are you protected from this kind of fraud? No, no. There's no way to prevent somebody from forging a document and recording it with the county. There's currently no way to do that. My company has created the solution. It needs to be rolled out nationwide, or at least in jurisdiction by jurisdiction for it to work effectively. But currently, there's no widespread way to prevent that first deed from being filed. That's the scary thing, and that if you sign up for a title monitoring service, if your county offers it, or if you sign up with Title Shield, then you can at least get notification of the first step, that first fraudulent deed, before they've then taken the next step to sell the property or take out a mortgage, and to really limit the damage and make it simpler and easier to resolve. The other technology will prevent it from the get-go, but it needs to be rolled out nationwide, and that's what we're working on. Okay, let's see. Where can one get a good PowerPoint for this subject? Deed fraud specifically, or speaking about the elder fraud issue? If you want if you want either of these, shoot me an email, and I'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint. That's not a problem. You can send it to david@davidfleck.com. You're welcome, Elizabeth. Do we have any more questions? Okay. You're welcome, Robert. Thank you for the kind words. Yes. Okay. So I'll be here for another 5 minutes or so if you have any questions you think of. But other than that, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Oh, the question, what percentage of fraudsters are caught? It's less than 10%. It could be much, much less, honestly. It's a very small number, honestly. We see the big ones that get caught in, we see those in the news and whatnot, but the vast majority never get caught. Probably less than 5%, could be less than that. The law enforcement is just outgunned, out overwhelmed by the number of cases out there. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. No problem, Jan. If you want the, is fraud increasing? That's a question. I don't know. I mean, the work I've been in, I've seen lots of fraud all the time. To me, it's always prevalent. It's nothing new. There's always been con artists. I think there's always a certain percentage of the world out there that is this type of person, this type of con artist, and they're always looking for new ways to steal money. So that's, I think, what's interesting here. Are the in real numbers, are they increasing? I don't know. But the number of prosecutions isn't really increasing. So. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming.
We have 2 questions in the question answer section by Adam Eberts. It's in the question.
The chat box?
No, he has posted in the question and answer section. So I'll just read out the question.
Oh, I see it here. Okay,
Yeah.
I can look at it.
All right.
Adam. Yes, we will make this available online, and we'll send you out an email when it is available. That's a good question, Adam. Thank you. My company solution. I didn't want this to be all about that. I want this to be about protecting our elders right now. But there, you can go to verilock.com, VERI-LOCK.com, and you can see what we've come up with. It's the only complete solution out there right now for this problem of deed fraud. You're welcome, Adam. Let's see. What is the best marketing for this product? Oh, wait, let's see. There are a couple more here. I think fraud is increasing. If you set your Google News for keywords like deed fraud, yeah. Oh, Brenda, I do that. I have lots of Google alerts. I get them every day about all sorts of different fraud. I just don't know if there's, I don't have the statistics to say that they are definitely increasing. It might be increasing with the population. With as the population grows, the percentage of fraudsters grows. I just don't know for sure. What is the best marketing for this product? William, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Okay, I'll wait for William, if you want to do a follow-up question, I'll answer it. But let's see. In the meantime. All right. Well, again, I hope this was helpful. And I hope you go out there and protect our elders, protect them. Again, we need to be there and watching and helping them and protecting them as they get older. Well, how do I sell your product to others? Oh, I see. Well, you can sell Title Shield. Shoot me an email, William. We have an affiliate program actually that's really beneficial to the affiliates. So if you're interested in doing that, please shoot me an email and I can get you set up with that. You can send it to david@davidfleck.com. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate your attendance. All righty. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.